In this video, we'll be taking a look at 5 college basketball games happening on January 18th, 2026, and providing you with free team picks and total picks for each one of those games, so 10 picks in total. Welcome back to Cash Out Sports. Let's dive right into it. Oh, and don't forget to subscribe and to click the bell icon to get notified as soon as these videos get released, so that you have more time to plan out your bets as we provide these videos on a daily basis. I can guarantee that you'll have all the important information that you'll need on these 5 college basketball games after fully watching this video. One more thing before we start, if you would like to gain access to our best exclusive sports picks to take your journey to the next level, then check out our Patreon in the link down below, where we offer our best single picks, parlay picks, and much more. Now let's get started. Florida Atlantic versus Temple. Florida Atlantic against Temple, Owls on Owls, and a noon tip in Philly sets this one up with a bit of chaos built in, even before we talk numbers. You have Florida Atlantic coming in with a 12-6 overall record and sitting on top of the American standings, and that is not window dressing. The advanced ratings back it up with a healthy positive efficiency margin that makes them look like a serious tournament team rather than a bubble squad. Temple is sitting at 11-6 and has quietly built a profile that looks solid, but when you stack both teams side by side, Florida Atlantic still grades out as the group with more staying power, a little more punch on offense, and a track record this season of winning by more than just a single possession when things go right. Here is the thing, the market knows all of that, which is why you see Florida Atlantic priced as a small road favorite rather than catching points in a tricky building. If you plug their resume and Ken Palm style efficiency gap into any basic power number model, this kind of matchup on a neutral court would project Florida Atlantic as the clearly better side, and even accounting for Temple's home edge, you still end up with a spread that feels more like pick the better team than pray the home crowd pulls an upset. Honestly, that is the sort of number that tempts you, because the books are basically saying, we agree Florida Atlantic is stronger. Now you decide if they can handle the Philly noise and the travel legs. Florida Atlantic's style also has a way of stretching games out over time, which matters for a spread that is this short. They like to play at a brisk tempo, around the 70 possession mark, keep pressure on you for 40 minutes, and lean into an offense that has consistently graded among the better ones in the country this season, while the defense is good enough to let that scoring edge show up on the scoreboard by the final buzzer. Temple, by comparison, is more balanced, averaging close to the high 70s on offense and just over 70 allowed, with a respectable scoring margin that still sits a touch below what Florida Atlantic is doing against a similar conference slate, so they feel more like a team that hangs around than one that regularly blows people out. That difference sounds small, but over a whole season it is the kind of gap that shows up in records, spreads, and as bettors love to talk about, against the spread results, where Florida Atlantic has been one of the more profitable tickets to hold so far. So when you put it all together, you get a matchup where the more efficient, faster, and more battle-tested group only has to win by a bucket on the road, and history this season says they are very comfortable winning by margins bigger than that when they are locked in. Temple will punch back at home, no doubt, but the underlying profile still points to the Owls from Boca Raton as the side more likely to create separation late with that offensive gear, and that pace holding up over 2 halves. As our first pick for this matchup, the Florida Atlantic Owls to cover the spread as favorites is our full game side pick. Books have hung a total number in the low 150s, around 151.5, and that immediately tips their hand that they are expecting an open game with plenty of scoring swings and a fair share of shot making from both sides. Florida Atlantic absolutely feeds that idea. They play quickly, they are comfortable in the 80s, and their season scoring profile has them living in that space where a normal night for them looks like a loose, high-scoring contest rather than a rock fight. Temple, though, acts as the counterweight here. Their combined scoring and points allowed sites right around the high 140s on average, and that is before you adjust for the fact that conference play usually pulls pace and efficiency down a touch as teams see your sets for the second and third time. They score well into the 70s, they give up just over 70, and those numbers hint at games that are competitive but not total track meets, especially in their own building where the energy is high, but the possessions do not always spiral into chaos the way they can on a neutral court or in some early season event. If you have watched enough American Conference hoops, you know how often those league games settle into long possessions, coaches calling sets on almost every trip, and both teams trading careful half-court punches instead of trading runouts, and this spot has some of that that same feel. So the tension here is pretty simple. Florida Atlantic wants rhythm, speed, and a game where they can put their offense on stage, while Temple's underlying numbers point more toward controlled, mid-range scoring totals that flirt with 150 rather than blasting past it. With a noon local tip, some early game legs, and two scouting staffs that have plenty of film on each other, it is not hard to picture a script where both teams score, but they do it more methodically than the number suggests, landing this thing in that high 140s to very low 150s pocket instead of a wild shootout. As our second pick for this matchup, under the projected total is our full game total pick. Tulsa versus UAB. Tulsa rolls into this one with a shiny record and a whole lot of confidence, but the setting matters here more than people sometimes admit. Bartow Arena is not just another gym, it is one of those places where runs feel louder and whistles feel a little heavier for the visiting side. Tulsa has been fantastic overall this season, sitting at 14-3, but they are also walking into a building where they have never actually walked out with a win, and that kind of history has a way of sitting in the back of everyone's mind once the game gets tight. On the other side, UAB's profile fits that classic short home favorite mold almost perfectly. They have the physical edge on the glass, they clean the boards at a level that stacks up with some of the better rebounding teams in the country, and that translates into extra chances and fewer one-and-done possessions. Tulsa's own rebounding numbers are strong, but UAB's combination of high rebounding volume and positive margin means the Blazers are usually the team dictating who gets to finish a possession and who has to sprint back on defense. If you have watched enough conference games in January, you know how often those grindy, physical sequences decide the spread more than the pretty action sets do. UAB is comfortable turning missed shots into quick pushes the other way, and when you pair that with their ability to protect the ball and keep turnovers low, you get a style that travels from game to game, but really shows up at home with the crowd behind them. Tulsa can absolutely trade blows, and in pure efficiency they might even look a little cleaner at times, but when you mix their 6-game losing streak in this series with the fact that UAB is still priced only as a small favorite by the market, it feels like the setup where the home side's physical edge shows up just enough to stretch a one-possession game into that 2- or 3-point window bettors care about most. As our first pick for this matchup, the UAB Blazers to cover the spread as favorites is our full game side pick. Everything about these two teams right now screams this is not going to be a sleepy rock fight. Tulsa has essentially reinvented itself as a high-octane offense, sitting near the top of the American in scoring, efficiency, and perimeter shooting, and they do it without needing one specific gimmick. They share the ball, they space you out, and they punish even small mistakes with threes or drives that end in free throws rather than tough mid-range jumpers. UAB brings its own flavor to the party. Their offense might not look quite as pretty from deep, but they score in the low 80s. They get second chance points off that strong rebounding base, and they push in transition often enough that opponents rarely feel like they can fully relax and walk the ball up. When you put an elite shooting team against a powerful rebounding and running team, you usually do not get many empty, sloggy stretches. You get spurts. A UAB burst off the glass here, a quick 8-point run from Tulsa's shooters there, and suddenly the total is halfway home before people in the arena have even grabbed a second snack. The numbers from the league context back up the idea that both of these offenses travel. Tulsa sits near the very top of the conference in scoring offense, scoring margin, field goal percentage, three-point percentage, threes made per game, free throw percentage, and even rebounding margin, which is a wild combination. UAB, meanwhile, is not far behind in raw scoring and sits in that upper tier of the conference in both scoring margin and rebounding, so they are not just hanging around, they are consistently winning their side of the efficiency battle. Put simply, both teams are used to games that get into the 80s, and both teams have styles that create extra possessions and extra whistles, the two quiet drivers of overs that people sometimes forget while they stare at shooting percentages. Layer the market context on top, and the picture gets even clearer. We are looking at a projected total in the high 150s, sitting right around that 158 to 160 range depending on the book, which already tells you odds makers respect how both of these teams score the ball. When you marry Tulsa's combination of volume and efficiency with UAB's ability to extend possessions, run off misses, and draw trips to the stripe, it is hard to build a realistic game script that does not involve long stretches where the scoreboard keeps humming. Sure, an outlier shooting night can always show up. That is college basketball, but with how both teams are currently performing, the more natural expectation is that they drag each other into a fast, free-flowing game that lands above what the total is asking. As our second pick for this matchup, over the projected total is our full game total pick. North Texas versus Tulane. We are heading into this one with a classic stylistic clash, slow grind against flowing offense, and the books have drawn a pretty thin line between the two. Tulane is sitting at 12-5 and near the top of the American, while North Texas comes in at 10-7 with that stubborn, blue-collar feel that never looks exciting on a graphic but keeps showing up on betting slips. If you have watched North Texas at all this season, you know exactly how they want this story to go. They are comfortable turning every possession into a little job interview. Long half-court sets on offense, long stretches of defense where you can practically hear the shot clock ticking even through the TV. Their scoring sits just under 70 a night, but what really matters is that they hold opponents to the low 60s, and that is not just decent, that is nationally strong, sitting in that top tier for points allowed per game. That kind of profile does not get many wow clips on social media, but for a short spread it quietly matters a lot, because every trip down the floor is worth a little more when the total number of trips is smaller. The market has been a bit slow to fully price that in, which shows up in how they have handled the number so far. A 9-6 record against the spread that tells you this team tends to punch at or above expectations rather than fall flat. Honestly, that is what you want when you are looking at a road underdog. Not drama, just a steady habit of hanging around. On the other side, Tulane is the more glamorous profile, home floor, better record, and an offense that actually enjoys running, which already puts them in a different universe from the mean green. They are scoring in the mid-70s, they like space, they like tempo, and they are powered by a true lead guard in Rowan Brumbaugh, who sits at the top of their charts in points, rebounds, assists, and steals, which is pretty wild for one player. He is surrounded by wings and forwards like Asher Woods, Curtis Williams Jr., Tyler Ringgold, Percy Daniels, and Scotty Middleton, all part of a rotation that can absolutely put together big runs when the game gets loose. The catch is that this kind of setup, one star steering the ship with a group of aggressive scorers around him, is exactly the sort of thing a defense like North Texas is built to bother, because they are really good at shrinking driving lanes, switching, helping, and just generally turning pretty possessions into ugly ones. Tulane can absolutely win on talent and shot making, and they have already shown they can handle close finishes at home. But a short spread means you are not really betting on who gives you the louder highlight. You are betting on who is more comfortable when everything slows down and the game turns into 4 or 5 straight possession trades in the final 2 minutes, and that scenario lines up way more naturally with the way North Texas already lives. Add in the fact that North Texas has been covering at a solid clip, including in underdog roles, while Tulane is being asked to clear multiple possessions against one of the better defenses in the country, and you get a matchup where the boring side actually carries a little extra value as long as they just keep doing what they do and keep this within 1 or 2 possessions late, which is very much in their wheelhouse and, to be clear, a projection rather than a guarantee. As our first pick for this matchup, the North Texas Mean Green to cover the spread as underdogs is our full game side pick. The total number sitting in the mid-130s is basically the sportsbook version of a raised eyebrow. It is high enough to respect Tulane's offense, but low enough to nod toward North Texas' defense, and it invites the question of whose personality really wins the tug of war on tempo. Tulane's side of the ledger is pretty straightforward. They want to score in the 70s, sometimes 80s, and they have done that all season with Brumbaugh steering the attack and multiple guys capable of stepping into a 20-point night when the rhythm is there. Their games are often about runs, little bursts where they hit a couple of threes, get out in transition, and suddenly what felt like a one-possession game is stretching out. That style is fun, and it is friendly to overs when the opponent is willing to trade punches. North Texas, though, really does the opposite thing to a game. They pull it down into the low 70s or 60s overall. They defend like every possession is a job review, and they are completely fine playing a game that feels like it has been stuck on the same score for 3 real-time minutes, which is eternity in college hoops. Their average points scored and allowed add up into a range that naturally lives around the low 130s, which is right where this total is parked, and that matters because the team that slows the game usually wins the pace battle more often than not, especially when they are this good at getting stops. Honestly, if you think about it like a playlist, Tulane wants up-tempo hits, North Texas keeps sneaking in slow tracks, and in a shared queue the slower songs tend to drag the mood down a little, even if you do not notice it right away. There is another little wrinkle that helps the lower scoring script. This spread is small, and small spreads are less likely to break into those wild late endgame fouling situations where the last 30 seconds double the score, simply because the game is often still in true play-it-out territory instead of desperation mode until the very end, and that keeps the scoring a bit more honest. Both teams are also effectively at full strength for this matchup. Tulane with no current injuries listed, and North Texas only missing Will McClendon for the season, which has already been priced into how they play, so there is no sneaky new rotation or short-handed chaos that might randomly speed things up. So when you put all of that together, a road team that specializes in dragging games downward, a home team that will suddenly find looks a lot more contested than some of their earlier opponents provided, and a total that sits right on the edge of what North Texas usually allows anyway. The path that feels most natural is a game that grinds more than it flies. With that note again that this is a forecast grounded in current season styles and not a promise about the final score. As our second pick for this matchup, under the projected total is our full game total pick. Arizona State versus Houston. This matchup has that classic feel of a confident juggernaut hosting a dangerous but exhausted visitor. Houston is sitting at 16-1 with a 4-0 start in the Big 12, playing in a building where they are one of the toughest outs in the country, and that matters even before we talk numbers. They allow only about 59.3 points per game while scoring roughly 77.2, so their average night is a plus 17.9 experience, and that is not just efficiency, it is a personality. They smother you, they chase every loose ball like it is the last possession of March, and when their crowd at Fertitta starts humming, teams stop running plays and start just trying to survive the next trip up the floor. On the other side, Arizona State walks in as that team everyone labels fun before they label reliable. They score around 80.8 points per game but give up about 79.4, which is basically playing on a tightrope every night, and in this league that is asking for trouble. You see it in their recent stretch. They hung 95 in that wild game against Colorado and still gave up 89. They went to Tucson and traded haymakers with Arizona in an 89-82 loss, and then there was the full-on avalanche at BYU where they gave up 104. The offense is loud, the defense is more rumor than fact, and against a group like Houston that loves to turn mistakes into 6-point swings, that imbalance becomes very real very fast. Here is the thing, Houston is not just winning, they are stacking routine double-digit margins on good teams, and they have already shown in league play what happens when a looser, offense-first group walks into their orbit. Ask Baylor about getting held to 55 in a 77-55 result, or West Virginia about the 77-48 kind of afternoon that makes you stare at the box score and wonder what exactly just happened. Those are decent, physical Big 12 teams, and Houston still turned the last 10 minutes into glorified conditioning. Now picture an Arizona State squad that already leans offense, now down rotation pieces like a Dante Holloman, VJ Wallace, Dame Selene, and Giovanni Tadovich, with Cash Polk not in the main mix, flying in after an emotional rivalry week and suddenly trying to win every 50-50 ball against one of the most relentless outfits in college basketball. That is a lot to ask of Mo Odom and company, even if they come in fearless. Honestly, the shape of this game sets up for Houston to do what they do best. They will pressure passing lanes, sit in a stance for 30 seconds, and force Arizona State into tough late-clock jumpers instead of the early, free-flowing stuff the Sun Devils enjoy. If those quick pull-up threes and early drives that feel great in Tempe turn into contested looks over long arms in Houston, this can snowball because the Cougars are so good at turning one bad stretch into a 12-2 run that breaks your spirit. Pile on the fact that Houston has won 14 straight at home, is an absurd 118-7 at Fertitta Center since 2018, and has rattled off 35 straight wins over unranked teams, and you are basically asking whether Arizona State can be the outlier that plays clean, rebounds above its weight, and handles 40 minutes of body blows. That feels like a long shot. As our first pick for this matchup, the Houston Cougars to cover the spread as favorites is our full game side pick. This total number in the mid-140s is really where the styles tug against each other. On paper it looks simple. You take an Arizona State team living around 80.8 scored and 79.4 allowed. You mix it with a Houston team posting 77.2 scored and 59.3 allowed, and the odds makers split the difference at a projected total of 145.5. The casual read is one fast, one slow. We will meet in the middle, but these games rarely live in the middle when Houston gets to dictate the terms. The Cougars love games that feel like climbing a hill in ankle weights. They walk the ball up, they run half-court sets, they send bodies to the glass, and they make you work so hard just to get a half-decent look that, by the second half, legs are gone and jumpers start coming up short. We have seen it in those Baylor and West Virginia wins, where teams that usually look comfortable in the 70s suddenly struggle to crawl into the 50s. When Houston plays their preferred tempo, the math slants toward totals that land closer to their usual combined score of about 136 than to Arizona State's more chaotic 160-plus world. Arizona State will absolutely try to pull this game into something faster. They like early clock threes, quick decisions, and a rhythm that feels like pickup ball with a band playing behind it, which is fun to watch and genuinely dangerous when they catch fire. The problem is that style depends on getting stops or at least long rebounds, and Houston's knack for controlling the glass and valuing the ball means fewer runouts and more possessions that start with Odom staring at a set defense and a shot clock already trimmed down. Road teams in this building often come in promising to run, then glance up midway through the first half and realize they are stuck in a 50-possession grinder anyway. Here is where it gets sneaky. If Houston does what we just talked about on the side, and they build a comfortable margin, Kelvin Sampson is not the let us turn this into an 88-70 shootout type. He is perfectly happy with a 71-58 kind of finish that sends the fans home smiling and keeps his team fresh for the next Big 12 war. Big leads often mean more clock milking, more bench minutes, and fewer early shots, which all lean toward deflating the total rather than inflating it. You can absolutely imagine the one script that ruins that idea, where Arizona State gets absurdly hot from three or whistles turn this into a free throw parade that drags both teams into the high 70s. They do have enough shooting and creativity to pop off on a random night. But when you zoom out and think about Houston's defensive discipline, their comfort dragging explosive offenses way under their usual numbers, and the reality that Arizona State has to play this one on the road against the best scoring defense in the country, the more likely story feels like something landing in the high 130s or very low 140s instead of flying past the mid 140s. As our second pick for this matchup, under the projected total is our full game total pick. Washington State versus San Francisco. San Francisco walks into this matchup looking like the grown-up in the gym, the group that understands its own identity and actually leans into it at home. They have a record of 12-8, with a comfortable scoring margin where they usually land around the mid-70s on offense while keeping opponents in that high 60s pocket, which paints the picture of a calm, organized favorite that does not need chaos to win possessions. Washington State, by contrast, is sitting at 8-11 with a negative margin and a defense that has been giving up roughly the mid-70s, so their offense is under constant pressure just to keep them within shouting distance. Here is the thing, the spot is not kind to the Cougars. They are coming off that rough 86-65 loss to Gonzaga, where they turned it over 17 times and got beaten on the glass. Then they have to pack it up and head into a tough road building where San Francisco has gone 7-2 at home. You can almost feel the difference in comfort level. One side gets to sleep in their own beds and shoot on their own rims. The other side is trying to reset on the fly after getting pushed around. Roster-wise, the Dons have a core that fits what they want to run, with guards and wings who handle, shoot, and stay locked in on the defensive end, and that main group is firmly part of the current 2025 to 2026 setup. They are not perfectly healthy, which matters. Mookie Cook is dealing with a knee issue and is listed out, and Ndueto Newberry has a leg issue that keeps him in that uncertain, questionable space, so the rotation is not at full strength even if the blueprint for how they play does not really change. On the Washington State side, the primary rotation is still there in theory, with players like Ace Glass, Jerome Morton, Emily Yalaho, and Nd Okafor all woven into how this team operates. The catch is that some of their better wing options are not straightforward. Thomas Thrasterson is out with a longer-term injury, and Richards Favors is working through a concussion that kept him out against Gonzaga, with no clear public update that guarantees he is fully ready for this one, so assuming he is 100% would be more guesswork than analysis. Stylistically, this is where the matchup really tilts. San Francisco has the kind of defense that bothers a loose handle, with length on the perimeter and enough quickness to close gaps and flip a lazy pass into a run-out or a clean catch and shoot three. Washington State has struggled with ball security, and that is not just a bad night here or there. They sit at the bottom of their league in turnover margin and in assist-to-turnover ratio, which is pretty much the worst possible pairing when you are stepping into a loud road environment against a team that loves to punish mistakes. So when you blend the records, the recent form, the travel spot, the injuries, and the style of play, you get a picture that leans toward the home side having more ways to separate as the game wears on. It is not that Washington State cannot compete for stretches, they clearly can, but over 40 minutes the combination of San Francisco's home comfort, their pressure on the ball, and the Cougars' shaky handle makes it easier to imagine the margin stretching rather than shrinking. As our first pick for this matchup, the San Francisco Dons to cover the spread as favorites is our full game side pick. San Francisco plays at a tempo that sits just a touch below the national average, not slow enough to be dull, but steady enough that every trip means something and nothing comes too easy. They usually live around 75 points scored and about 69 allowed, and that blend tends to produce final numbers that stay in a moderate band, competitive and intense but not wild. If you scroll through their results, a pattern shows up over and over. Games feel close, possessions feel important, yet when you look at the totals, you often find scores landing in that middle zone where both teams have worked hard for everything without pushing the combined number through the roof. It is the kind of game script where you might feel like a lot is happening, yet the actual math on the scoreboard is more modest than your memory of the action. Washington State's season averages, sitting around the mid-70s on offense and mid-70s allowed, can make them look like a track meet team on paper, but the reality is choppier. They have nights where the shots fall and they stack points, and other nights where decision-making slips, the turnovers spike, and possessions drag out, which fits a group that has documented issues with ball control and a rotation stretched by injuries. The Gonzaga game highlighted that problem, with the 17 turnovers and the physical battle on the glass turning large chunks of the contest into half-court grinds instead of clean, up-tempo basketball. Now picture that same offense, still dealing with wing injuries and concussion recovery questions, going on the road against a San Francisco defense that is comfortable contesting everything and finishing possessions on the glass. That mix usually leads to more empty trips, fewer easy transition chances, and a lot of possessions where both teams are digging in the half court. From a scoring standpoint, that kind of tug-of-war tends to cap the ceiling a bit, since time keeps bleeding off the clock while both sides work through set actions. The projected total for this matchup sits in the mid-140s, around 143.5 at many books, which assumes a fairly open game where both teams play near their season scoring averages. Given San Francisco's habit of holding opponents under 70, their slightly slower pace, and Washington State's turnover profile and banged-up rotation, it is very reasonable to expect a result that more often settles in that high 130s to low 140s window instead of blowing past the top of the market number. Think of a game that is competitive, physical, and emotional, but where the final math looks more controlled than explosive. As our second pick for this matchup, under the projected total is our full game total pick. That's all for now, so if you have any other games you would like reviewed, then leave a comment down below with the game you would like analyzed, subscribe to our channel, leave a like on this video, and we'll get to it as soon as we possibly can. We would also love to hear your opinion on the picks presented to you in this video, whether you agree or disagree with them, so leave a comment down below and do let us know.